Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and wrestling's premier photographer, Dr. Mike Lano. But we have a very, very special guest tonight. And, a lot of people say, well, you guys just love professional wrestling. Why don't you ever talk about real wrestling once in a while? Talk about a real sport. Well, today we have somebody on that knows all about real wrestling, and that is Richard Goodwin from Benicia, California. And thank you for being our guest tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very honored.
I saw your story on the local news, and I was absolutely fascinated with your life story and everything that you've gone through, and that you're a five-time jiu-jitsu world champion. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. I think so.
And you're going for the full-on world title, right?
I'm going to go wrestle in the Veterans Worlds in October. I won the U.S. Open in April. So then I set a goal, like when I won the U.S. Open, I was like, okay, we're going to go to the Worlds in Hungary. So that's what I've been training for.
Wow, that is really amazing. That's really amazing stuff. And Dr. Mike only has a few minutes he can spend with us. I'm going to throw the mic over to him first and let him ask you a few questions and talk to you about a couple things. And then we'll have the rest of the hour that we can chat about a lot of stuff, including your background, which I really want to know and want the listeners to know about.
Yes.
Very super impressive. Now, I, of course, miss the Bay Area terribly. We lived up there, my wife and I, for 40 years, and had to come down here to take care of our folks a little before COVID hit. They were nearly 100 at the time. I miss the Bay Area. I was in Alameda, but I lived in San Francisco and Marin, and the climate, everything about the Bay Area, and there's a lot of great wrestling, more so than where I am in Southern Cal. But there are, I was there when this was before UFC, and I had been at Hickson and Hoyce and Elio and the Gracie's jiu-jitsu palaces, and particularly Hickson's in Torrance, California, which is just is amazing. And this was the weird thing, just very quickly, because you probably will appreciate, I hope you know these names, but around 1988, the original Tiger Mask, Satoru Sayama, he and a bunch of legit amateurs from Inoki's New Japan all left, and they formed a super group that was known as UWF. They had the very first show of any kind, even before sumo and baseball, which was a big deal, at the Tokyo Dome that year for this UWF group, and then they all splintered. That includes Fuji. So all these superstars were in just one group, which also included Ken Shamrock under that goof name, and the guy from ECW who was a legit amateur guy, Little Guido Maritato. But you were talking Fujiwara, Masakatsu Funaki, Akira Maeda, and Nobuhiko Takada, who all formed different groups. And then Takada's group was marketed in the U.S., this by Joe Hand Productions, before he started marketing the debut of UFC and all that came out of that. So seeing that, with these disciplines of jiu-jitsu, can you alert our audience what's the difference between what I consider, from my limited knowledge, to be like upper tier Gracie jiu-jitsu, emanating from Enzo, the father, and then all of his great sons and that whole family. And sometimes you see something called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but in different malls, they're not really affiliated with the Gracies. Are there different? There must be different, groups.
I think
Brazilian.
So 1983, when the UFC came out and Hoist Gracie fought on the Ultimate Fighter, and then everyone, Ultimate Fighting Championships, and everyone saw the first jiu-jitsu guy with a gi on, and then it just kind of exploded. And, the Gracie name was huge because that's, where it came with Helio and the Gracie family, which is the biggest sports family in the world. So, when I started in 2002, I think, because I'm a second degree black belt now, I trained under Hickson, from blue belt to brown belt, under a couple of his black belts. So I've been, I have a lot of knowledge of the Gracie, how would you say it? their knowledge
But
of
is that the
techniques.
top tier of jiu-jitsu? There's
I don't want to
many
say
varieties.
it's the top tier because it's, just like anything, it evolves. And, every, like back in the day, like for instance, I have two jujitsu academies and I'm not under the Gracie name. I put it under my name, and now it's, everyone has the opportunity to, have their own schools and it doesn't have to be under the Gracie. So, things have kind of evolved in that retrospect. I think in the beginning, if you didn't have a Gracie name, you weren't going to get any students because
Uh,
that's what everyone knew. They were like, that's the family, that's who created the sport. And then how do we, people were getting in academies and they were affiliated under the Gracie name. And um, again, I was with Hickson and them guys until I was a brown belt. Then I went under, and I got my black belt from Bryant Pangilinan, which was under another Brazilian, uh, and he, like anything, he's moved on and got his own academy. And I originally started, like I said, with the Hickson guy, and he was a friend of mine, which is a crazy story. He was the highest belt back then. He was a blue belt, and we were in his garage. And I remember going to seminars with Hickson, and then I remember going to take my friend when he was a blue belt to get his purple belt with Hickson, and I drove him to L.A. when he was, when he, I think he moved since that time, and I remember pulling in the driveway, and then here comes Hickson Gracie, and you're like, this is like the Bruce Lee of
right.
knowledge, and
It was like
all,
godlike,
yeah.
godlike. But then, did he get ill or something? He kind of disappeared from the face of the earth for.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he's gotten ill. Another interesting, my interactions with Hickson were that one time, and then another time I went there and I spent a couple days at his house with the two black belts that I trained under. So I got
Uh,
to meet the man, like, and spend time with him, and his knowledge of the jujitsu is, he'll go to, when he passes away, he's taking tons of jujitsu with him. Like, he's so knowledgeable, but he doesn't really, he's not a public figure, like, he's got his son, Crohn's got his school down there, and occasionally he'll go teach. But, I think if you're going to interact with Hickson at this time, you're going to have to go to his house, and not everyone can go there. But to me, that's a couple days that I spent there. I got to ask him questions, just how the UFC and what's changed in jiu-jitsu, and it's so big now. Jiu-jitsu is so huge. I was just at the Master Worlds last weekend. There was 12,000 fighters there. It was insane. Like
it's so weird to have watched that at the beginning because Evan and I knew Emmanuel Yarborough, who was
yeah,
what was
a great.
604-pound sumo guy, sweetest guy in the world. Sadly, we lost him, but I almost loved that sort of wild UFC because there were all these different disciplines, and now pretty much everybody it's homogenized into this one thing, and so everybody is kind of well versed in all these different disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as fun as the stuff I was photographing Octagon side in the 90s.
Right.
Like
Yeah, I
the
mean now it's,
Ultimate with Oleg Taktarov and
yeah.
Danny Severn and Shamrock was there and Chemo and Tank Abbott, all of these great characters. And,
I
you
mean now,
know,
it's so big and it's mainstream now. It's, you can watch UFC every weekend. And now if you found
but
out that,
there's not as many superstar names. I think there's more. I'm looking at like the last big female superstar, Amanda Nunes, etc.
I think
And
when Ronda, Ronda was she was the face, and she brought women's MMA where it is today. And yeah, I mean, there's so many names of or UFC now that, you know, it's so common to watch. Now you don't have to pay for pay-per-view anymore. You can watch it for free on Paramount now after this year. So it's
yeah,
only going to get bigger.
that'll be good for folks. But with Scott Coker, and since I was
Yeah,
always on their press list, I went to all of their events,
yeah.
particularly in San Jose. There was Elite XC, and then Bellator. I don't think Bellator is even
No,
functioning much now, which is a real shame because that was part of CBS and Showtime, and it would have been on Paramount Plus had they
Yeah.
just survived for this deal. Dana just absorbs all the competition.
Yeah. And then I was just at A1 last night. Uriah Faber's putting on a good little promotion. It was an amateur promotion. It was probably the most well put together amateur organization I've been to. Over the years, I've been to some other smaller ones, and they're not. Uriah does a really good job. I mean, he really promotes the younger fighters now, and he's brought like MMA to Sac State. They have their own octagon in there. I think there's a class now, and
Wow.
jiu-jitsu, and so
Uriah was such a good guy, exciting to watch, fun
yeah.
guy. But let me turn this around to wrestling because I kind of, with this Hulk Hogan passing, he was supposed to have like a shoot TV league, a competitive league of
Hmm.
some sort. They allege that it's going to be happening. But I remember, and Rulon Gardner was part of it. It was like maybe 16 years ago, maybe 15. There was something that was televised, and it was like collegiate amateur wrestling. I don't know if it was a team format, but it was on TV. It didn't do the ratings we all hoped to keep it alive. Do you remember that competition show?
I don't remember it so much because if it was like WWE or was it
No, no,
regular?
no, no. It was
Right.
legit amateur,
So,
but it was a weekly show,
hmm.
and they would. I don't know if they have judges rulings on these
So
matches.
I think last week they have this new thing called RAF. I'm not sure what it's called, but last weekend they had a lot of the big names of amateur wrestling, and they were giving them belts and saying they're the RAF world champion. I think some of the big names like Yanni was on it, Bo Nickel was on it, and some of the world team members that are current world team members, Real Woods. So they're trying to do that again, like a team thing. I think they're trying to bring it back. Um, so maybe it'll take off because a lot of people, they know about amateur wrestling. The only way they would know it is if their kid participated in high school or middle school. Especially here in California, it's so competitive
Good,
wrestling
and
wise.
it's exciting to see more young girls and girls of age
Yeah,
and teens getting interested in competing. I mean, they can, whatever, certainly monetize it later if they wanted to go pro, because some of them are, end way streets in terms of earning, monetizing and earning
yeah,
revenue for it. But at least in WWE or the competition, or particularly Japan, they'll get amateur wrestlers. They get to a certain level and they have to turn pro. What do you have some thoughts on pro? Because I've covered it since the late '60s. I've watched it since about '65,
right.
and it's like the theater of the absurd. But and Lou Thez, who was my boss at Cauliflower Alley, all the years I was on the board with Dan Gable was on our board then, the great Dan Gable, who's one of those great amateurs. And
And Danny
uh,
Hodge, obviously.
yeah, Danny was on our board. Danny Hodge. Well,
Mhm.
those are the hooker shooters. Have you heard those terms though yourself? We have those in pro wrestling, the upper echelon, and most of those guys are all dead. Maybe Kurt Angle's the last hooker shooter, but it was Lou Thez, Vern Gagne, Billy Robinson, Carl Gotch, obviously the god of
Yeah,
Japan, Dr. Big Bill Miller, who was a veterinarian when he wasn't a pro wrestler, but he could break and pop joints. Larry Simon, the great Malenko. I think Hans Schmidt was in there. Bert Asariti of England, and I might be leaving out one or two. Stu Hart, definitely
Billy
father of.
Robinson.
Didn't I mention him? Billy was in there, and
yeah. I mean, I wish that when I was younger, I felt that WWE wrestling was taken away from the sport that I grew up doing, regular wrestling. So it was like, but then as I got older, I see that they're great athletes, and then like it got more interesting when like Kurt Angle did it and Brock
yeah.
Lesnar because there
Dan
were
Severin.
names that I knew, right? And then of course then you got to watch it a little bit more, but you know,
Oh, a good buddy of mine. I mean, he would, and their adoptive father Bob and Ken would come with Frank Shamrock, and I know once Bob passed, there's been this crazy heat renewed between Bob and Ken, who were both adopted brothers. But I mean, Frank, I still talk to. I was at some pro wrestlers. Nigel McGuinness did a magic show, and so Frank Shamrock comes in and he brings some WWE wrestlers like Rusev and some other folks. The commentator, the Mamma Mia guy who does boxing and MMA and pro wrestling. I forget what his name is. He's Canadian, but they brought him in there. But Kenny Shamrock too. I forget if I think only Frank is the only one that's still up in the Bay Area somewhere. I forget where.
Yeah. Couldn't tell you.
So do you see, and then I'll shut up, this will be my last question. Do you see on the forefront, what exciting things do you see in legit fight sports, not the WWE stuff? And it's cool that Brock Lesnar is back and all of that stuff. I mean, that guy I think he's made more money than Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle made ridiculous money.
Right.
Left. Oh, those are the two things I was going to mention is Kenny Shamrock and Dan Severn took to pro wrestling, very well. Particularly not to the extent that Kurt Angle did. He just seemed like, everything clicked for him as an entertainer wrestler.
Right.
What an amateur. I mean, you got to look at the stuff that he was doing, his amateur footage. That guy was off the charts, incredible.
And I think when he won an Olympic medal, his neck was broke.
Yeah, his neck was broke.
Kind of crazy.
That's his catchphrase. I got 2 gold medals with a frickin' broken neck, or a broken frickin' neck.
Well, they're about to do a movie on Mark Coleman.
With The Rock playing him.
Yeah.
The Rock doesn't look hardly anything. I knew those two guys.
But the preliminary reviews,
people they say Rock is going to get an Oscar nod.
Yeah, they say it's tremendous, and people are
crying. It's good, but I was there with both of those guys, Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman, at Rick Bassman's dojo.
Oh, it was Mark Kerr, not Coleman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kerr and Coleman. I think The Rock is playing Kerr. Or one of the other. One of them is alive. The other, sadly, is not. But they were training. They said, we can't really hardly make any money once we're out of UFC. So they're getting trained for pro wrestling to just work simply in Japan by Rick Bassman, who was promoting like a version of Battle Arts, MMA shows, legit shows. Even though also he was promoting pro wrestling. But those guys were the best of friends. It was sad. One got kind of hooked on stuff and passed, but those guys are like big polar bears. They were eager to learn and to see, start doing arm locks, legit stuff after they got tired of doing the phony pro wrestling stuff. It was kind of a pleasure to see that, any of those guys.
Right. I think Ken Shamrock was one of the greats. I mean, he was one of the first Americans that, really took into jiu-jitsu. So he had a really good jiu-jitsu game. I think if he started when he was younger, obviously if it was around, he was older when it came around. So,
how about one last name, Minoru Suzuki, one tough bastard. He was the one that Ken was feuding with in the UWF super group before they all splintered and had their own groups. But I don't know if you've seen or heard much of Minoru Suzuki, he's got jiu-jitsu training. Familiar. Yeah, he's like a badass. Now he's, does a crazy man act in pro wrestling, which is at odds with his very quiet, legit sports when he was doing wrestling and jiu-jitsu and stuff. But you guys have an awesome show.
Nice to meet you.
Russ really worked hard, and we should have more amateur wrestling talk and, legit sports on this show too. One last thing, Russ, is the GCW, which is kind of a violent wrestling group. You might want to trademark infringe lawsuit them because they're calling their wrestling tour Wrestling Coast to Coast.
Wow. Well, we were first. We have
maybe they can adopt this as their official show.
Right. No, we have 5 years ranking over them. But anyway, thanks for joining us, Mike. And
thanks, Mike.
We'll see you next week.
Kongbate kudasai, domo arigatou gozaimashite, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yes. So, Richard, now it's just us. But first thing I want to say is that I myself studied jiu-jitsu for 5 years. I had a green belt in Okinawan jiu-jitsu. I was studying to get a brown, but then I got injured and I couldn't continue. So you specialize in Okinawan jiu-jitsu, don't you?
Brazilian, I guess you would call it.
Okay, but did you ever work with any Okinawan jiu-jitsu stuff?
Just all been Brazilians, yeah.
Okay. But why don't you tell our listeners how you all got started? Your origin story is absolutely fascinating and very inspiring. So why don't you take a second and tell everyone about that, please?
So, I mean, like the show had showed that I grew up wrestling. I started wrestling when I think I was in the eighth grade in Pacifica, California. I went to a high school. Well, I was about to go into high school, and I was a basketball player, even though I'm only 5'5". But at that
Pacifica
time,
High? Is it?
no,
Did you?
Oceana High School. It's in
Oh,
Pacifica.
Oceana. Okay.
Yeah, and so I had two friends, and they were wrestlers, and then they were like, "Look, wrestling's the biggest sport at Oceana High School," and I'm like, bigger than football, and
By the
it
way,
was huge.
shout out to Nick's. Shout
Oh,
out to Nick's in Pacifica.
yeah.
My adopted grandmother was my uncle was an endodontist, and he did the dental work for the entire Nick's family. So
Oh,
we were
nice.
always welcome over at Nick's for a crab salad sandwich and the garlic bread. But just
It's still there
it's a
this day
local
too.
thing. That's a
It's a
local
local
thing.
thing, yeah. That and fish and chips there in Pacifica. I don't know if you ever had a chance, but
The crab
yeah.
salad sandwich. Yes.
So
So
growing up so my friends told me like you better take wrestling serious because the only way you're going to get a girlfriend is if you wrestle, and you had to be on the varsity team. Well, Oceana High School at the time there was 100 guys on the team,
whoa.
and I was like 89 pounds my freshman year. So and back then it was 98 pounds. And I think I was maybe like fifth man on the team.
So you're the definition of a 98-pound weakling.
Yeah, definition for sure. And then my my friend was like, "Man, you got to make the varsity lineup, or you're never gonna see the because at Oceana High School when you had a home match, we had 1,500 people come. It was amazing. Like you ran out to Chariots of Fire back in the day. It was blacked out and had a strobe light.
Wow.
It was like um, it was where you wanted to do that if you were on that wrestling team. And
Just
so
like the late 70s, early
it was
80s.
80s, yeah.
Okay.
Because I graduated 85, so it was like
Okay.
80 in the 80s.
I graduated in 85 too, so we're
There,
the exact same age. How about that?
there we go. And then yeah, so like I said, I was determined to make that team, and I was fortunate because my next door neighbor was state champ. He was 51-0. Can you hold on one sec? I'm just
Yeah,
gonna get my
sure.
dog. Sorry about that.
It's okay. As I say, we'll fix it in post. That's always.
Sorry, I apologize. My dog was, yeah, anyway.
Oh, we're a dog-friendly show. What's your dog's
Oh
name?
yeah, he was a little French bulldog, and he think he wanted to come and hang out, but
Oh, what's his
anyway,
name?
Ozzy.
Ozzy. Nice.
After Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was gonna say, named after the late Ozzy, huh?
Yes.
Wow. That's very impressive. So, okay, continue on.
So then, long story short, my neighbor was, the state champ.
Oh, you can make the long story long, by the way. We've
Yeah,
got
okay.
time,
He was
so
state
go ahead.
champ. So he beat me up for a whole summer. Like it was bad. Like just pounded on me. Uh, but I always had the philosophy you're as good as your partner, right? So my partner was him, and he beat on me. And then when my sophomore year came around, I made the team. I was the varsity guy. I mean, I didn't get a girlfriend, but I still was able to, be part of something that was huge. We were top five in the state as a team. I was a three-time state qualifier. Placed fourth my senior year in the state tournament in California, which, if you know about California, it's pretty hardest state meet to place in is the California state meet.
Wow.
I've seen many, great wrestlers that went on to, like Dan Henderson never won I don't know if you remember his name. He was an Olympian, two-time, and he never even won a California state title.
Wow.
So it's just list goes on and on how tough the California state meet is, even to this day. I think in California, if you don't start wrestling at 5 years old, you better think about what your goals are going to be in California as far as becoming a wrestler. If you want to be a state placer in wrestling, there's so much that has to happen. But again, I was fortunate. I was on a great team, and I think I'm going to get inducted into the Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame here pretty soon. They reached out to me this week, the town
Well,
that I
that's
grew up
great.
in. And then, just being part of that team, we were section champs the whole time I was in the team. Top five in the state as a team. And then when I was coming out of high school, I wasn't really recruited because I was a 98 pounder. Um, so I walked on at San Francisco State. I think, um, and then from there, I had a really good, college career. Division two, I was a freshman All-American, and um, so I mean, I had a good career at San Francisco State, and then I struggled in school, and this is where kind of things went a little dark. I kind of started hanging out with the wrong people. So you can always say that story, and then I was the life of the party, and then I ended up drinking and doing drugs, and even though I finished school, it was really I can go back and say a million things why it happened, but it was my choices, and then I was losing the battle. I think in the show they talked a little bit about it. I was homeless for a long time, and but even at that time being homeless, I was something in me was like, because once you've wrestled, life is easy. They always say that, and I was like, what am I doing here? I grew up wrestling, and it makes you tough and this and that, and then but I was losing the battle, and then overdosed more than one time, came close to death. Never really had any legal troubles. I don't think I was that intelligent, to be honest, to do it, to get in trouble legally. But um, again, just being homeless. And then in 2007, I checked into a detox in Vallejo, where I live now, and I've been sober ever since. And then now, like, I was sober, and then I was like, man, I need to get back on the mat, and that's how I started jujitsu again. I actually started jujitsu in 2003, but then I was losing my battle with drugs and alcohol, and I was training and still drinking and doing drugs, and it was just bad. And surprised I never had a heart attack. And then, then I stopped, and then in 2007, when I got sober, I met a friend, and he's like, hey, you want to train some jujitsu? And I said, yeah, well, I did it before, and then it just took off. It was something that I needed, the balance. Um, when you get sober, you need some things to maybe help you mentally and physically and spiritually in a lot of ways. And jujitsu, was what I needed. And then I started coaching wrestling too, at Benicia High School. Um, some great guys. We all coached together. We coached many championship teams, but I kept doing the jujitsu thing. And then, being so, I'm coming up on, well, in January I'll have 19 years sober. So definitely,
Congratulations.
definitely did a lot of, changing both mentally, physically, and obviously spiritually. And then when I got my black belt 6 years ago, I decided to open my jiu-jitsu academy. It's called New Creation Wrestling and Jiu-Jitsu. It's after the Bible verse, 2 Corinthians. So that's where we named the gym. And then, my purpose was just to have a place for people to come and then, learn jiu-jitsu. And maybe if they're struggling with whatever they got going on, was the motivation of the academy. But also, for me, the physical part was okay. You can, compete in jujitsu. So obviously, I started competing, and then, I won a world title at every belt, gi or no gi. So I'm still competitive, obviously. And they always had the veteran nationals here in the United States. I think it's every year in April, and I'd seen it, and I never could get the time to train, number one, and actually compete in it until recently. um, in April, I made the time and dedicated myself. I didn't know. I thought that I could still wrestle like I was 20 years old, but when you start wrestling hard and training wrestling at almost 60, your body's like, what do you got going on here? I was beat up. I was days I
Oh
could
yeah,
barely.
no, I can't even do a mid-sized workout, and I couldn't get back and do any combat sports at this
Yeah,
stage in my life.
I'm fortunate. Like my body's, I'm in pretty good shape. Like I said, I'm getting ready for Worlds, but um, it's just trying to keep myself physically in shape. Has been the easy part. Just trying not to be hurt is the other part. You know, uh, yeah. I mean, it's
Well,
been
I
awesome.
fell and I broke my shoulder a year ago, and I
Oh
had to
yeah,
have my right shoulder completely replaced.
yeah,
So, I can say a lot about, you get a lot more, and all the worst injuries I've done to myself have not been through combat. It's
yeah,
all been through like falling over my retaining wall in the garden or falling down
yeah,
my stairs in the rain kind of
yeah. But
thing.
I put myself in a position where I teach 5 6 days a week jujitsu, um, and then I still work. I work for the Department of Corrections. I'm a director of a program for lifer inmates to become drug and alcohol counselors um, through
It's
Options
amazing.
Recovery,
It's
Options Recovery
amazing to
Services.
go
So,
from it's amazing to go from being homeless
right. I mean,
to now helping people out like that. That's
I think that's what I think where my spiritual portion of it, uh, that's where I needed to be to send the message. Now that that show aired, I have more and more people reaching out that a lot of people they don't want to talk about their struggles with drug and alcohol, or it could be gambling, whatever they got going on, food. But now that I put myself out there, some people feel okay. Maybe I can talk about my situation too. So it's been great because people have reached out, and then it's gave me the opportunity to maybe guide them in the right direction and help them and let them know it's possible. Because addiction's pretty heavy. We're in a crisis right now with the opiate crisis. People got hurt at work and they started getting painkillers, and then now they're doing the fentanyl, and it's just it's crazy right now in the Bay Area and all over. So
I understand that fully. I when I broke my hip, I in 2016, falling down my stairs, I took the opiates, and that almost made me want to commit suicide because of just the emotional
it's
toll that it
yeah,
takes on you. People don't understand what when you have something like that. What I tell people is that everybody has a little voice inside their head that tells them that life would be easier if you just killed yourself. But most people can drown that voice out completely.
yeah.
But
I
when you
mean,
take opiates, it gives that little voice and gives it a giant megaphone where it can shout at you 24 hours a day.
yeah.
And
I
you
mean,
start thinking the easiest way to deal with it is to just end your life because then it won't be bothering you anymore.
yeah. I mean, people are. It's so crazy right now. I mean, I talk about you know, I'm I'm sure there was fentanyl when I was 18 years ago, but I'm glad I wasn't around because I probably would have liked it, and then probably would not be here today. I came close to drinking myself to death. I mean, the detox from alcohol was brutal. I spent a couple days in the intensive care, and that was when I was like, I got to make some changes because you know
Yeah, tell me about that for a little bit. When you were in intensive care, did you feel like you'd completely hit bottom?
I think that was it. Yeah, that was everyone's bottom is different. And I think I heard a quote recently like, everyone's bottom's different. It depends on if they stop digging, right, to the bottom. So for me, again, mine was, I went to the detox. They sent me to the ER, and then I spent a couple days in intensive care. And when I woke up, I was like, the nurse was like, man, we're glad you're here because we didn't think you were going to make it from the detox. And
uh,
then I mean, maybe I went back to that detox and I laid in that room and I remember just saying to myself, like, I got to make some changes. I mean, what else can I do? I was, 40 something years old and, you know, lived a crazy homeless life where there's no, I don't even want to say responsibility. And that even worse, I had kids and I was a terrible dad and um, just everything that addiction could take away from you, it took away from me.
where are your kids
Uh,
now?
they're great. They're adults. They're in their 30s, and my daughter goes to USC. She's about to graduate. So we repaired it, as best we could. Considering, I and I used to not be able to say it, but I chose drugs and alcohol over my kids and my family, and there's a price you pay, definitely. Um, but I've been fortunate. They've forgiven me for the most part, and they're living great lives, and their mom did a great job, uh, and hats off to her, and she raised three amazing kids, and again, we talk occasionally, and they're doing great stuff. So,
Did you ever go and ask yourself why you got yourself into all this trouble, or does it even matter at this stage when
you
you?
know, I I look back and I try to, you try to blame people, and at the end of the day, that's the thing. People want to blame other things that, possibly put them in the situation I was in, but it was really my decision to just go down the road of dysfunction. And it's all about my behavior was just terrible. You know,
But do
I,
you feel there was a source to drive you to something like that, or anything that was a cause within
well,
your emotional?
yeah, I mean, it was just like, you're sick in this addiction, and you're chasing these, alcohol, drugs, and then you're homeless, and you got to beg for change, and your life is. But what's interesting or crazy is, being homeless. A lot of those individuals that are homeless, they all know each other, and they're, to me, at one point, I was like, I was good with living in a tent. I mean, that's how I thought. Like, in this madness of my addiction, I thought that's how it was supposed to be. And that is just crazy to think. But, as long as I continued to feed my addiction, I was just living day by day. But when it starts to become an issue where you can't feed the addiction anymore, like you don't have any money, you've already burned, maybe robbed or burned a drug dealer, or you can't even get enough change to buy liquor, that was it started going down that road where, it was getting harder to pretty much keep the addiction going. So I was fortunate enough to hit that bottom, and it just kind of was like, I got to make a change. It was, it was, I was going to die. And that was the straight up, I mean, I was going to die if I didn't stop. I think anyone that's in their addiction, and I've been on many, you know, it's, they're chasing death for sure.
Wow.
And
So
that's the,
tell me a little bit about, your feelings about jujitsu, and now we can talk a little bit about the art itself, because Mike isn't a martial artist. But
yeah,
for
you know,
instance, what is your favorite kind of thing to do when you're involved in jujitsu? Like, what do you want to get somebody's arm? Do you want to get
you
somebody's
know,
leg? Do you want to get
it's,
someone's head? What
yeah,
do you
so
want to do?
it's funny. Everyone has their own kind of style, right? So obviously with me with a large wrestling background, so it's pretty easy for me to be on top, right? Like I can, but since I was like, that was easy for me, I wanted to be able to fight off my back, pull guard so I enjoy pulling guard and being crushed and then trying to figure out a way to get out. Because that's kind of how jujitsu is, right? You get in one position. It's kind of like a chess match. That's kind of how I tell my students. Like I would tell my students, and I do it every week. I'll put myself in a bad position and then try to figure my way out. And then it becomes kind of like, I don't want to say a game, but it's kind of, okay, today I'm going to let somebody armbar me. I'm going to try to get out. Sometimes you don't get out. Some of my you know ideas of trying to get out of things don't really work out, and then I'm getting crushed or I'm getting choked but that's I just enjoy the fact that I could put myself in any position and figure out how to get out. Like when I was talking about Hickson, the time that I spent with him, I could ask him a question about any position in jujitsu, and he would think about it, and then he would come up with like, you know, hey, this is how I think it should go, which makes him like I said, his jujitsu knowledge is so top tier. We'll probably never know it all, which is kind of crazy.
Isn't that great too, about when you think about the fighting arts, that there are people that just know so much that you can never, and he would probably still agree that there's stuff he doesn't know, and
I'm sure he does, and because
that it's always a learning art, that you've never quite mastered
yeah,
the
jujitsu,
fighting arts.
there's no like, you know, oh, I'm a black belt, so I know everything. That's not even the case. I learned from even my white belts that have just started. Like, that's the thing about the beauty of jujitsu. an endless knowledge trail you can always learn. That's why it's evolved so much with no-gi jiu-jitsu, with John Danaher and Gordon Ryan. It's, them are the big names. So it's become more, I don't want to say mainstream, but more and more people know about it.
Well, and MMA is its own thing. I
Right.
mean, as Mike was mentioning earlier, it used to be that just, you were a karate guy, or you were
Yeah.
a judo guy, or you were a Muay Thai boxing guy, or whatever, and you'd all get together and fight, in
Yeah.
a UFC type format. But now there's people that grow up and that's all they want to do is know how to be a cage fighter.
Yeah.
They don't. They aren't learning other arts. The art itself is the cage fighting.
Yeah,
and I never thought that we'd be in a time where that would be a thing, where people would just say, "That's what I want to learn how to do fighting wise."
I get it all the time. I get so many young kids that come and they want to be MMA fighters. I have a great MMA coach, Izzy, and his son AJ. They're Muay Thai guys. They're awesome. They've been with me, for years. And we get it all the time where young kids want to be MMA fighters. And of course, we're going to do the best we can to get them to where they want to be. We have a coach for every discipline for the most part. Wrestling, we have jiu-jitsu, we have MMA, or, Muay Thai, boxing. All those things have to come together to make it work, to be an MMA fighter. And I think people need to understand that to become an MMA fighter, like a UFC fighter, a lot of things got to go right. And you got to be in a good, it's you can't just walk into a local gym and, hope that happens.
Well, and the thing that I appreciate also about MMA is, a lot of people are like, well, it's so violent, you get hurt so badly, but as opposed to boxing, where all you're doing is getting head punched the whole time. Yeah. In MMA, your whole body's involved. So in a lot of ways, you don't get hurt as much because you're getting hurt all over. I'm not saying that your whole body. You're not getting hurt, but you're not getting concentrated on one part.
Yeah.
Where especially your head. And I do see, although there was that whole situation with Raj Jackson that unfortunately
that wasn't a good scenario. That is that was terrible. I mean, I couldn't even how does that individual would even do that?
Well, and the thing that I've always admired about jiu-jitsu is that it's about control, and it is about disabling your opponent but not killing them.
Right.
And
I mean, he was defenseless. He was not even defending himself, so it's just crazy.
And anyone who considers themselves a martial artist, emphasis on the art part of it, knows that you just don't keep slugging somebody when they're obviously incapacitated.
Yeah,
you have to have a little switch in your head that says, this guy's done. Right. I can back off. I mean, you've obviously found.
I think in that scenario, the internet is I don't know, it has its moments, right? You have these individuals that use the internet to hopefully like in that situation, what was he going to do to get out of that? And it went all over the internet in a negative light towards him. I think his dad even said he's disappointed in him. So, his own father, who was a great MMA fighter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But getting inside that ring means that you're creating a contract between you and your opponent, that if your opponent is incapacitated, you're not going to keep pounding him, and you don't want him pounding you continuously if you get in a compromised position.
Yeah.
You both have to have that agreement. You can't be an unchained animal in the ring. And too many 100%. People think that's what happens with MMA fighters. They don't realize the amazing amount of discipline that goes within someone like yourself to be a 5-time champion, that when to stop. That's
I think even when in my gym, you got to understand, and I think we do a really good job at my academy with all my students. I mean, if they get somebody in a position where they're not going to get out, we're just going to let them go. There's no sense of I'm going to make them tap. Especially when you're new, tapping is so foreign. And so you want people to understand that, hey, we're not here we want you to go home tonight and be able to have dinner and I mean, I've been fortunate because I created a class and we call it the parent class. So all the people in this one class, on Monday and Wednesdays at my academy is all parents, moms, dads, because their kids are training in the other room. So I created a family cohesion of jujitsu. So then the whole family's doing it. And
And they
those
can
guys,
understand.
they're great. They've created an environment in that workout room for themselves that they're learning jujitsu. They get to battle a little bit and beat each other
Wow.
up, and then they go home at night.
Yeah, and they can definitely understand what their kid's going through
Yeah.
and how hard it is. I get that. That's a great idea. So tell me about your road to the world championship. First of all, what made you even decide that was something you wanted to try to embark on? And then how are you going to get there and
Yeah.
everything like
So,
that?
so like I said, they had the U.S. Open in April. That's called the Veterans, Nationals. Um, so
Were you
obviously,
contacted by them or
no, no,
okay.
I just saw it every year. It comes up every year. It's at the same time as the U.S. Open for adults. So they have the adult, the young stars like, the Olympians and all that stuff, David Taylor and all the, he's coaching now, but Cal Dank was there, all the big names that are still competing. And then they had the Veterans Nationals. I think we ended up having, there was a total of 500 veterans. So they have ages from 30 to, they go from A to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or E, which is the oldest division where I'm at, E. But I think they go every 5 years. I'm not sure the gap of ages, but so they have a national championship for them. And then, my goal, like I said, I hadn't really I wrestle a couple of days a week with some high school kids, but that's just, I'm not training, right? So when I signed up for the tournament, I was like, well, I gotta get in wrestling shape. And so I started wrestling with guys that were going to do the tournament. The same tournament. There was a team called here in Northern California called Mad Cow, a bunch of older guys that all wrestled at UC Davis or San Francisco State, and then they created this team.
By the way, I'm just curious, since you're about the same age, did you work at all with Tony Jones at SF State?
I know Tony Jones, yes.
Oh,
He was younger than me.
he's been on the show. I worked with him at All Pro Wrestling and Pro
Yeah,
Wrestling Iron, and I was at his
great
funeral
individual.
last year. What a great guy. I'm glad,
He he went to Reardon High School, and I coached at Reardon High School. I don't think he was on the team then. I think he was already graduated, but no, he might have came later because I started coaching there in like 1990. So, but yeah,
yeah,
great individual.
yeah. No,
Um,
he's really tragic
sad,
loss. Really tragic
tragic loss.
loss.
I didn't really knew how did he pass away? Did he have a heart attack or?
Heart attack, and he's
Wow.
like our age. He was a couple of years younger than us.
Yeah.
So it's always, sobering. He was just
Yeah, it
watching
is.
TV, got up, and he felt dizzy, and just that was the end of that.
Wow.
You just never know when your number's called.
Yeah, you don't. And then he was huge in the wrestling. W or he was big. Yeah.
So I thought
Um,
I'd bring that up
yeah,
since you
great
mentioned
person,
SF
man, for
State.
sure. Definitely.
But yeah, continue. So you
So
were
again,
working at SF State. You were wrestling at SF State. And then how did you hear more about the championships?
oh, the U.S. Open. Well, they had it every year, and I just follow it on the internet. And then one of my good friends, his name's Bill Newton. He wrestled at San Jose State and Cal State Bakersfield. He'd competed in it several times. And then he saw that I'd posted some pictures that I was getting ready to compete. So then he ended up reaching out to me, and we started training together down at Gilroy with Daniel Cormier's Wrestling Academy down there in Gilroy. I would go down there and train with them guys. Um, and then he's actually going to be my coach. He's coming with me to Hungary. So he got me ready, and then I went into the national tournament, and um, my wife is a huge supporter, and she, you know, him and her getting, as I went through the tournament, I had 7 matches. Every round, Bill would say, "You're the best person here. We're going to win a national title. We're going to win a world title." So I mean, obviously anybody can go to the World Championships if you competed in the U.S. Open. What depended on what you placed or whatever. It didn't really matter. So there wasn't. So that being said, they came out with the dates, which would be October 7th through the 10th So then, USA Wrestling, if you're interested, you would send USA Wrestling. But unfortunately, they're not giving any money to the, the competitors. So if this is something that you want to do, you're going to have to raise your own money.
That's a perfect segue into you letting our listeners know how they can help you in getting to Hungary.
Yeah. So, the trip itself, and I wanted to bring Bill, my coach, ended up, we had to pay for airline and then UWW, which is United World Wrestling, they require you to stay in their lodging for 3 days. Not real cheap, but it's part of like an Olympic Village feeling, I guess, which is cool. It's going to kind of be exciting to be there with Team USA, and then there's other teams, obviously. It ended up being you know, we had to raise probably, or still, raising close to $4,000, to, airlines, it was close to $2,000, and the staying there was, it wasn't cheap, but, I mean, again, I did a couple seminars, and people have been amazing. We had shirts, people bought shirts and contributed to the trip, and, anything that, anybody can, give to, help with the trip, that'd be amazing. Where, the trip is less than 30 days out. We're leaving October 3rd. Just to be able to go to the trip and not have to worry about, you know, paying for different things. But I think we got a lot of it covered. Like I said, my members and the community have been amazing. The show was.
But go ahead and toss out the website so that people can know how to contribute to you.
Yeah,
if they see
you would just go to our my gym website called New Creation Wrestling and Jiu-Jitsu.
New Creation
Wrestling and Jiu-Jitsu. Just put
That's
it in
all
Google.
one word.
Right. It'll come up. I think the actual website itself. Obviously, I don't look at it a lot, but my wife is the mastermind of that.
Oh, cool. That's very nice of her.
She's it's New Creation Wrestling and Jiu-Jitsu.com. Yes.
Great. Wonderful.
So go ahead and get on there and send my wife a message, and then she'll, if you want to donate $10, $5, anything helps for, for this trip. And it's going to be amazing. I think, like I said, it's going to be an opportunity to, and I've said this goal even on the show is like, if I win a gold medal, I'm going to run around the arena with an American flag. And, I think every kid wrestler or anybody has probably dreamed that. I think even, almost 60, age isn't really a limit, right? You can go ahead and participate in this amazing event with, individuals that continue wanting to wrestle and good for the sport. So I'm excited. It's going to be, again, getting in shape again it's been interesting, but I'm not hurt, so that's.
And where's your dojo located?
So I have two. I have one in Benicia, California, and then I have one in Concord, California. So I have it in two cities. The one in Concord just opened a couple months ago. Again, when I opened in an academy, it was really about creating an environment for kids and people to come and learn the martial art or wrestle or learn how to box or just be in a positive environment. I think, again, that's huge for kids today. Get them off the iPad and get them, to come in and learn and make friends. And we've done a really good job with that. Like next weekend, I'm going to 2 weekends from now, I'm going to a tournament with 29 students to a jiu-jitsu tournament. Majority of them are kids, and that's what it's all about. Yesterday, I had 11 kids compete. I think all 11 of them won medals, and just to see their face, like, that they accomplished something, or it's just awesome.
That's fantastic. Do you have any message you'd like to give to our fans before you sign off?
So I think the biggest thing for me lately is, we live in a crazy world. I think giving, I've been on this thing like to make somebody's day. So when I go to the supermarket, this is just, I'll ask the cashier how their day is. And some of them have not one person has ever asked. Some lady was like, "Did you just ask me how my day was?" I go, "Yeah." She's all, "I needed that today." So I wanted the world to be a better place, and I want people to be kind, you know. And that little gesture can change somebody's day for better.
Wow.
You know.
Richard, I couldn't be happier with having you as a guest. Like to have you back on, hopefully after you've won your championship.
Yes, we'll do it. Yeah, we'll have that conversation. I'll send you the video.
Be thrilled. I'd be
Me
thrilled.
running around the mat.
Someday I would like to get a chance to come see your dojo too.
More than welcome.
Watch your stuff go on.
Are you in Novato?
Yeah, I'm in Nevada.
Okay, so
you're not too far.
Yeah.
Not too far. So, I'd love to come check it out sometime, but I'm not going to get in even.
You don't need to get on the mat.
Yeah, I'm studying Qigong now, and I'm doing the nice soft martial arts stuff because I know where my limitations are. And
I'm going to send you, I think I saw your address on the email, right?
Yes, yeah.
I'll send you a T-shirt out.
I'll be thrilled. I'll be thrilled to wear it.
Yeah, what size shirt?
Extra large. I should be a large, but too many holiday foods, and I moved into the extra large category. But thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll make sure that again, newcreationwrestlingjiujitsu.com, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And donate if you can. Give support if you can. We're really looking forward. We'll all be rooting for you. When is your actual date of wrestling going to be?
I wrestle on October 7th.
Fantastic. So it is close.
So it's coming close. So
wow. Well, best of luck to you.
Right
Thank you for being on the show, and we'll see everybody next week. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night. Bye now.